Hello and welcome to the first episode of the La-Mulana lore videos. Here I hope to complement the LP I'm doing in order to explain all the various influences in the game, and hopefully you viewers will be culturally enriched by all of the things you see in the game along with the explanations I give. So let's just get into it, shall we? As mentioned several times in the game through scanners and other content, the Gate of Guidance is actually a reference to the Olmec Ruins in Mexico. The various heads embedded in the walls of the Gate of Guidance are actually a nod to the god Olmec, and these are actually real statues in Venta Ruins, and there are 4 that exist to this day. Not only are these statues real, in 2009 these statues were actually at risk of being damaged by some people trying to perform a pre-Columbian ritual to bring about peace and world healing. Luckily these guys were disposed of, so these statues are still here to this day. You could probably find them in La Venta right now. Another landmark seen in La-Mulana just before the Holy Grail puzzle is Monument 19. In La-Mulana, it depicts a Aztec warrior riding a feathered serpent, but I believe in La-Mulana it's actually considered a mechanical monster. This is actually a relief in La Venta called Monument 19, and it's one of the earliest known depictions of a feathered serpent. Not much is known about this monument, but it could be speculated that this could be the link between reptiles and birds. Much like how people speculate that maybe dinosaurs were too big and they became chickens. Also, the thing to note, there is an interesting shape in the hand of Monument 19, which is shown in this video. Later on the game, you'll notice something familiar about it as well, but we'll discuss that later. Much later in the series. One unusual monument in Gate of Guidance is the depiction of a Mayan calendar. This calendar is actually right next to the entrance of the Mausoleum of Giants, and while it's there, I don't think the scanner actually depicts anything. But interestingly enough, a skeleton makes reference to this and makes reference of an Armageddon in 2013, which is funny because all the doomsayers in 2012 were saying that was when the Mayan calendar predicted the apocalypse. Well, looks like video games got their shit right at least. My only concern is that I don't think Mayan culture extended over to La Venta Ruins, but I think that oversight could be left to artistic creativity more than anything. Now, while Gate of Guidance had a lot of references to the La Venta Ruins, there are also a lot of cultural references to other cultural artifacts. Probably the most famous reference and most useful tool in La-Mulana is the Holy Grail. I won't go into much detail about the Holy Grail, suffice to say it's a famous religious icon for the Christian faith, and it's referenced in many cultural icons, such as, say, the Arthur movies and other legacies, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail. Though that last one's kinda personal opinion. Another non-Olmec reference we see in this game is the appearance of Chi-Yo. Chi-Yo is actually depicted in many Chinese and Hmong cultures as a tribal leader, and more specifically in the Hmong people, a sagacious mythical king. Chi-Yo is described as having a bronze head with metal foreheads. He has 4 eyes and 6 arms, and each arm is wielding a very terrible and sharp weapon. His head was that of a bull with 2 horns, but his body was that of a human. He was also depicted as being very fierce. One interesting thing to quote, however, is that in one of the many stories of Chi-Yo, after Chi-Yo claimed that he could not be conquered, the goddess named Nuwa dropped a stone tablet from him from Mount Tai. Unfortunately, Chi-Yo failed to crush the stone but still managed to escape with his life. Those who have played La-Mulana though all the way to the end will know this little reference, and we'll see it later in the series, but I thought this was a really clever nod. Another cultural icon in the Gate of Guidance is really hilarious, the Shuriken. I'm not gonna go bother explaining that because any nerd worth their weight in salt knows what a Shuriken is. But I just thought to know that it was really neat that they called this a sub-weapon because in Japan these weren't used as primary weapons. They were used to confuse and disable opponents in order to make them think that they were cut by an invisible swordsman more than anything. It's really corny to call this a cultural reference, but shurikens in Mexico is just really weird and I had to point this out. Also, La Mesa having a ninja weapon is pretty hilarious with reasons we'll see later in the videos. One last reference in the Gate of Guidance is something I didn't even know fucking existed, and my good friend Altio had to tell me about this because he too was kind of curious as to what this is. The blue leapers found throughout the entirety of Gate of Guidance are actually called snouters. This was a book written in Germany at about 1967, and these are actually creatures. These disgusting little things actually run around jumping on their nose in order to transport. And dear God, these things are disgusting. I mean, good lord, they look horrifying. But aside from my personal disgust of them, I found it weird that these are actually a real thing and somebody took the time to figure this out. My only concern with this reference is, unless you actually know what the thing is, how are you supposed to know? You can't scan the enemies in the game, which is kind of disappointing, because there's a lot of stuff in the game, like the Jiangshi later on, that are really cool, and I wish we could have known this without having to, like, actually look it up. And that's it for La-Mulana lore this week. Next week we'll take a look at the Mausoleum of Giants, which is really cool because you had the Nazca lines there, along with other references. I'm not sure about the Giants references though, I'll have to look into those myself. Stay tuned though!